We're now live.
Meeting is in session. Hello and welcome to the Capitola Planning Commission meeting of November 3rd, 2022. In accordance with the California Senate Bill 361, this is a hybrid meeting with commissioners and the public attending both in person and remotely via Zoom. Information on how to join the meeting using the Zoom application or a landline or mobile phone, along with how to submit public comment during the meeting tonight, is available on our website, cityofcapitola.org, and on our published meeting agenda. As always, this meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable TV Channel 8 in the city of Capitola and on Channel 25 throughout Santa Cruz County. The meeting is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. Meetings can also be streamed live on YouTube or on the city's website. Our technician tonight is Eric Johansson. And now let's move on to the roll call.
Commissioner Christensen? Here. Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Commissioner Ruth?
Here.
Commissioner Westman?
Here.
Chair Will?
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2 is oral communications. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Okay, we'll move on to public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to speak for up to 3 minutes on items that are not on the agenda. If there's anybody who wishes to make a general comment, now is your time. Please come forward to the podium. Or if there's anybody on Zoom, please raise your hand.
We have 5 attendees on Zoom, no hands are raised.
Very good. Let's move on then to commission comments. Any commissioners comment on item? Very good. How about staff?
I just want to inform you that come January, we'll have updated technology for the sound system integration after, I think, 2 meetings ago that we had some issues, followed by other issues with City Council. So we plan to continue to go hybrid, but we're investing a little more money into our system to make sure less flaws come up and that there's more interaction with the members on Zoom. And as a reminder, when the public does come up to speak tonight, to have them please speak into their microphone, so that the folks at home can hear them as well.
Very good. I'll try to remind them. Okay, let's move on then to approval of minutes. We have 3 minutes we need to approve or review or comment on. Any comments on the minutes or motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 18th, September 1, and October 6th.
We'll hear a second. We have we have a motion by Commissioner Westman and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Are there any other comments? Let's have a roll call vote then, please.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Newman?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth?
Aye.
Commissioner Westman?
Aye.
Chair Will?
Aye. Meetings are approved unanimously. Move on to item 4, the consent calendar. These are items to be taken all at once, and there are 2 items, El Salto and Capitola Avenue, a building permit and a continuance. Does anybody of the public or the commission wish to take any of these off the consent calendar?
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that you take them one at a time because I cannot vote on B.
Okay, let's just talk firstly then about 602 El Salto Drive. Does anybody wish to make a motion on that or take it off the consent calendar?
I'll move approval.
We have a motion to approve El Salto. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion to approve by Commissioner Ruth, a second by Commissioner Westman. Any comments? A roll call vote then.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Root,
Aye.
Commissioner Weston,
Aye.
Chair Wolf.
Aye. Item B, 401 Capitola Avenue, you need to recuse yourself?
Yes.
Okay. So now we have 4 commissioners willing to vote on that, or able to vote on that. Are there any comments, or is there a motion?
I move for continuance.
Motion to continue, a second?
I'll second it.
Second motion and a second to continue 401 Capitola Avenue. No more comments. Let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
I recuse.
Commissioner Root,
Aye.
Commissioner Weston,
Aye.
Chair Wolf.
Aye. Okay. Consent calendar is approved. Moving on to item 5, public hearings. This is where we get a chance to talk about the items one at a time. We'll go through 5 items. Staff in order, staff presentation, questions from the commission, then public comment, then deliberation, and finally a decision. Our first item is 935 Balboa Avenue. Do we have a staff presentation?
Thank you, Chair Wolf, and the Commissioners. Balboa Avenue. The item before you is an appeal of an administrative denial of a tree removal permit to remove 1 eucalyptus tree within the multifamily low-density zoning district. This evening, we will describe the tree removal application process and present the appeal. Next, the appellant will be given the opportunity to speak and answer any planning commission questions. I will then open up the public portion of the hearing, and that will be followed by a planning commission discussion and decision. Proposed tree removal is a mature located on both properties at 935 Balboa Avenue and 1001 Balboa Avenue. The tree is part of a larger grove, eucalyptus trees separated in Liquid Heights and the Park Avenue road going down to New Brighton. Subject tree is approximately 135 feet in height, a large canopy, some of which extends over both of the residential structures at the aforementioned properties. Trees are not located in an environmentally sensitive habitat area. It's come up on question if it was on our area. And back to reference. That process, when we can make findings on a staff level to approve the new. That process will go straight down from pre-application, staff evaluation, findings, formal filing of application. Most tree removal permits are reviewed at that level. With the preliminary review from the public works staff, we can approve the removal of non-heritage trees only if the findings removal contained within our community tree and forest ordinance can be made. If the findings cannot be made, the application is transferred to the planning department for the review. The city may require the applicant to pay for an arborist under contract to the city and provide a report for the tree. The community development director will then make a determination based on the findings of the arborist. The pre-application was submitted in 2020. The arborist report dated from 2019. That was prepared without any city involvement. That initial report recommended the retention of the eucalyptus tree. Staff subsequently visited the site and did not see any changes to condition of the tree since that arborist had come out. And subsequently was not able to make findings. 2022, approximately 18 months after the first review by the unaffiliated arborist, the city contracted a second arborist to assess the tree. The city arborist also recommended that the tree be preserved. Following that second review, staff formally denied the application, which was then appealed by the neighbor in September of this year. 2023, tree for removal of a non-heritage tree. At least one of the findings for removal must be made, and there must be no feasible alternative. Findings, which include the health and of tree, safety considerations, and property damage, are shown here. Will be addressed individually by the following slides. The first finding for the health condition, staff and the arborist found the tree to be in good health and growth. The codominant stems are can be structural, in this case, with that condition, and the arborist reported a low likelihood of complete failure. There are no evidence of any decay or disease or safety considerations. The arborist found that the tree poses a low safety concern without mitigating action. Any dead branches over 1 inch in diameter were recommended for removal, but other than that, the arborist found that in addition to the main stem being a safety consideration, he found that 5 branches was a low likelihood. With respect to property damage or the likelihood of substantial property damage, city staff and the arborist found that the tree has not caused and not likely to cause significant property damage. As mentioned before, there is hanging deadwood which has the possibility of causing some property damage. In addition to that, there was some sections of fencing at the base of the tree which have been lifted and damaged as a result of the growth. The concrete patios mentioned in the appeal in the backyards of both properties show cracking, but staff and the arborist did not believe this appeared to be caused by root growth. It would ultimately take an excavation to explore and find out what the photos shown here were submitted by Ellen at 2001. The sections of fence that were referenced. Patio here is on the side. Pertaining to the feasible alternatives to removal, something that in order to approve of the removal of the tree. The arborist found that there were feasible alternatives short of removal available for this, including the removal of that deadwood, like the thinning on the larger limbs to reduce the weight of those branches and further reduce the dropping of live branches, and the consideration of cabling of the main stem to main stem. That recommends the commission uphold the determination and deny the appeal.
I have a question.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
Yes.
Wait.
If we allow the removal, what would the replacement requirement be?
So that was something that came up earlier. There's a fence line behind this house, which doesn't seem to accurately represent the boundary of the property. The property appears to extend a considerable way, about 40 feet into that eucalyptus grove. So the fact that this is already a large lot, there is a substantial area on that lot that is completely covered by canopy. So even with this removal, it appears to be about 30%.
So there would be no replacement requirement.
That was our initial thought.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, let's move on to public comments.
I think if the appellant wants to speak, that would be the first.
All right, let's start with the appellant.
If you could come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to issue today. My name is Mohsen Khan. I'm one of the owners of I have been a resident of Santa Cruz County for the last 24 years. I own several properties in Santa Cruz County. I'm not against trees. The garden, I love gardens, except in this case, when the bought this property, this tree was there, was huge. Tried to address it. It's really not on our property, it's on our neighbor's property, 935 Balboa Avenue. I'm the owner of 1009. Not a tree that we share, except because of its size, because it's huge, humongous, colossal size, it has overgrown, and it has overgrown to our property. Where now it has damaged the fence, and it continues to damage, not that only the fence, but it's also encroaching as, mentioned, on the, what we believe is, the patio, which is cracked. And also the size of it is 140 feet long, tall, that's 10-story building in the backyard. Okay? As it was mentioned, the lot has tremendous amount of canopy cover because we are right on behind Park Avenue. We have all the eucalyptus grove. We have maintained some of those smaller trees on our side. Again, in all honesty, the two pictures that you saw do not provide 10% of the justice of give you an indication of the size of this tree. I am afraid for my tenants, for my property. I currently have renters there. I don't wish to have them there the whole time. We're eventually going to use the house for ourselves, me and my partner. The tree drops branches, small branches, leaves. We have dealt with that. The question is, what happens with if there's a big branch that comes down? What happens if, yes, the arborist says that it is healthy right now, but is it going to be healthy a year from now? We don't know. It has a split. I have submitted to you, and I don't know if you have read over my appeal papers and 12 points indicating why I believe this tree should be removed, that we have gone through this legal process following the city's permit process with the approval of the owner of 935, 2-year period. And the discussion with the actual new owner of the property at the time, Joe Sophie, started in late 2019. Then we were hit with COVID, and then we had to stop, and then we started the process with the city of Capitol. So over almost going to be 3 years trying to just gain a permit to remove it. If there is a need for a replacement, we're more than happy to do a replacement for something smaller, some trees. Everybody will benefit from. There's a letter that was sent from one of our tenants, also to the city, indicating the threat that they see from the tree. I'm asking the commission to reverse the decision of the city on denial of the permit. Please, I wish I also had asked today that if you were willing to come and see the tree with your eyes. I had asked the tenant to provide permission, and they did. And I was expecting, hopefully, that you would be able to, before this meeting, that you would come to the backyard and see it, and tell me if this is something that you would be able to live with. Now, I have a very good neighbor. Joe has been cooperative in this process. We're together on this. But maybe I would have made different decisions if it was in my backyard. But this is out of the history, and right now, removing it, we need a professional company, they need a permit, you know the process. We don't want to do anything that is going to jeopardize or increase the risk of anything, and we see that there is a risk with the maintenance of the tree in this position. So, I'm appealing to you, again, as a resident, as a homeowner, as a concerned citizen, that this tree, yes, it has been there for a long time, but time has come for it to be removed because of the potential danger. We see that there is a clear and present danger to the property, to the residents. Yeah, it may not happen now, it may not happen this winter, but with the climate change, with the storms, with the weather changes, I see it. It's huge. Again, I just wish that you come and see it. The pictures, I've provided several pictures in the packet that I hope that provides you some kind of idea, but it's nothing close to, compares to actually seeing it in your own eyes. And I don't know if I need to go over the information that has been already submitted to you. I don't want to take all your time here, but there's an issue of the tree encroaching on the property. I don't own the tree. I don't want the tree to be encroaching on my property. I don't want it to be breaking the fence. I can't have a neighborly fence because the fence has been broken by the tree. Actually, the tree is pushing it over. Doing it is a short-term solution, and it's not the solution. We're looking for one solution to this that will. It's not going to be by any means a low-cost, reasonable solution.
Okay, we have had a chance to review the packet and your information, and we really appreciate your information and all the hard work you've done. And are there any questions of the applicant while he's here?
Is there anybody that values the tree in your neighborhood that you know of? That has anybody besides you and your neighbor? Has anybody come, for against?
For maintaining it?
Is anybody else bothered by it, or is it?
Is there anybody else that is bothered by it? My two tenants that live on the property, and obviously the owner is locally and as well.
I think your question was, is there any neighbors that have objected to the idea that you would take it down?
No.
Other questions of the applicant? I thank you very much. Let's move on to other.
I don't know if there's anybody on Zoom that wants to talk.
Well, I think we can continue the public hearing.
Yeah, move on to public comments. Yes, from other members of. Thank you. You may sit down.
Thank you.
Other members of the public wish to speak on this issue. Now is your time. Please step forward to the microphone. And is there a sign-up sheet?
There is. You could.
If you could just, so for the minutes, it's good to have your full name. So and you have 3 minutes to state your case.
I've been living at 935 Balboa since 2015. That tree's been loved by our family. We care for it. It's been constantly, they come out and do some treatment every year to make sure it stays healthy. It's a beautiful tree. I mean, it's part of the ecosystem. I mean, it's been there. It's probably the oldest thing on the hill. And it's glorious. I mean, we could be afraid that the airplane is going to fall in our yard tomorrow too. I mean, things can happen, but that tree has been inspected several times over the years. And all the arborists that have seen it and commented, they said it's very healthy, it's in good shape, and there's no need to remove it. So I don't know what the problem is.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anyone else?
Chair Wilk, we have, 5 attendees via Zoom. One would like to speak. It's number 2, Tony S. Unmute, he's now can speak.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it was hard to hear everybody, but I'm also the co-owner of this property with Mo, and we've really looked at all our options and avenues in terms of making this work, but the reality is, this does present a danger. Now, with the climate changes and all that, one big storm can really do a great damage because it is a big tree. It carries a lot of weight. I would say a major windstorm would easily break a few of those branches and cause damage. Now, I understand one of the neighbors saying, it's not a danger. Well, if it's on his property, he wouldn't say that because obviously it's not on his property. He doesn't care about the danger that happens directly on the 2 direct properties that it sits on. So for us, we're trying to be proactive rather than going the legal way and wasting your time, wasting our time. We're trying to be proactive in terms of really addressing the issue before it happens. And I think that's the smart approach, the savvy approach in terms of really rectifying something that you could probably see may cause of, great either danger or damage. Because again, with its weight, with its size, it can actually cause more than damage, but potentially, who knows, depending on who's sitting in the living room and the branch falls in the living room, it could potentially cause, a death. So again, we're being proactive. There's 1,000 other trees right behind it. We're not taking away from the looks of the area. We're not taking away anything from the environment. I think we're just, again, being proactive and doing the right thing for the better rather than, keeping it and just procrastinating and hoping, nothing will happen, which we don't want to go that route. So again, understand that we're taking the proactive approach, the smart approach that keeps everybody safe, healthy, and hopefully no major incidents. That will reduce the cost from all aspects, from a homeowner perspective and the city's perspective. I think we've all seen the damages that big trees can cause when they do fall. So, the further away from the actual structure, I think the better off we are. So I hope you would take that into consideration. Of course, nobody has inside information. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But we know we do get major storms throughout winter. And a lot of times we carry heavy, heavy wind. And really that would be the big factor that we would be more concerned with.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Other comments? Anything from Zoom?
No other hands up from Zoom.
Okay, so we'll close then public comments and,
I'm sorry. There's another Zoom.
okay?
Joe? Unmute.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, Joe, we can hear you.
Yeah, anyway, well, thanks for taking the time to everybody here to talk about the tree. Yeah, it's a beautiful tree. I think it's the nicest tree in the whole grove there. But as my neighbors, Mo and Tony, when we first purchased the property a few years ago, they were real concerned about it. Yeah, there's been several arborists that have come and done studies on the tree, and they all say it's healthy and everything like that. But it is a ginormous tree. It's as big as a redwood, and I think they and I are just concerned that if it ever did fall and land in the way of the properties of the homes there, it would cause a lot of damage. So, like Tony was saying, we're just trying to do the right thing and be proactive and go through the proper channels. So that's what our motivation is here. And I just want to say thanks for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Let's then bring it to the commission for deliberation. Do we want to comment on this one?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Okay, so first, I want to say that our staff handles these tree applications very consistently and thoroughly and fairly. They are bound by what I consider to be a very rigid statute that doesn't really take enough variations into consideration, but that's not their fault, and they apply it as they see it. I think we as a planning commission have a little bit more discretion. My concern here is, well, first of all, Mr. Fout's report, by the way, I did look, and I think probably most of us went and looked at the tree from the street. Mr. Fout's report rates the danger, the risk of the tree as moderate. So, to me, that needs to be balanced against the nature of the tree, which is one of a huge number of eucalyptus trees in that area. So that if it were some other, not a heritage tree, but some other species of tree that maybe was more unique or needed or necessary or less plentiful, maybe the standard for risk would be a little bit different. But for me, the fact that there's tons of eucalyptus trees out there, and they'll get big too over time, I think what causes me to balance this in favor of removal. Even though the risk isn't huge, it's enough given the fact that it's one of hundreds of eucalyptus trees in that grove.
Thank you. Mr. Newman? Anyone else? Go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, I went out Tuesday afternoon and looked at it, peeking over the gate there, and my concern was that it might be a major part of the whole eucalyptus forest and leave a big hole in it. But it looks to me like it's kind of an outlier towards the Balboa side. So that eliminated that concern I have. And, recently the commission just approved 2 very visible public trees to be removed at the end of Wharf Road because they dropped pine needles and caused some minor damage to the sidewalk. And some people that supported it got a better view. Mm-hmm. But, this tree, I think, probably with the potential for the property damage and the damage it's caused right now and the fact that it's not going to really impact that whole urban forest there, I could support removal. I think we need to be consistent, and that would be consistent with our prior decision.
I agree with Commissioner Ruth. I did go out and look at the tree as well, and this one does seem to be forward of the main grove of eucalyptus trees. And I think that removing this tree is not going to have a huge impact on the canopy that runs along there with all of the other eucalyptus trees. And I also agree with Commissioner Newman. I think the staff did an excellent job on going through the process and evaluating the tree. And if I had been in their position, I would have come to the same conclusion based on the findings that they have to make. But for us, we have a little more flexibility, so we can make a finding for removing the tree.
Courtney?
I agree with everyone. I've lived under eucalyptus trees in the past, and every year is a new branch or deadwood or something falling, and it just seems that even if you were to remove it one year, it would be happening the year after. I support.
Yeah, I also would support removal. The reason, well, I visited it. Not only did I visit it from the front, but I went around the back from Park Avenue and climbed that little hill and waded through the forest. And it's a big, beautiful tree. It's very healthy. I was the one who asked the question about the monarchs. If it was to be a monarch grove, this would be, certainly part of that ecosystem. But as it was pointed out, there's no history of that. I would tend to want to agree with staff. However, as Commissioner Ruth pointed out, there's precedent that's been set recently on trees. He and I both have been trying hard to save trees several times and have been shot down. And the reason is because, first of all, safety first, right? We've had a redwood tree on 47th Street that we voted to save, but it was overturned by the city council because of safety damage, and basically big trees are dangerous, and this is a big dangerous tree from that standpoint, even though mitigations can be done, but, you know, you're talking about serious expense, putting cables in, constantly moving dead wood, this and that. I hate to put the owners through that expense unnecessarily, especially as Courtney pointed out, that's still going to be a problem. So the safety issue seems to be one that we're going to continually come across whenever there's a big tree, and I think the city council, even if we try to save a tree, is going to say, no, safety first. Finally, there's the other thing we're supposed to consider is structural damage, and that was the reason that we approved the removal of the canary pines on Wharf Road because of the sidewalk was damaged and the curbs were lifted and this kind of thing, and that was going to continue to be a problem. Well, I mean, those are safety problems that could easily have been handled with just shaving down the sidewalk. Nevertheless, that's, you know, that and the pine needles was what got those trees removed. And so I can look at the fence being a structural problem. You know, you constantly have to worry about the fence and the property line. And I looked at that patio from behind, and to me it looked reasonable to assume that crag did come from the roots of the tree. So, you know, how do you distinguish between a lifting patio and a lifting sidewalk? So to me, I think in order to be consistent, we need to follow the precedents that have been set, especially recently. It's also a non-native tree, so that kind of weighs against it. So I think I'm with the rest of you in terms of thinking that as beautiful as a tree as it is, and it is, I mean, it stands right out, it's not worth keeping. So
I'll move that we accept the appeal and allow the tree to be removed.
We have a motion by Commissioner Newman and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Any further discussion? Have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Newman?
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Westman?
Aye.
Chair White?
Aye. Appeal is approved unanimously, and go ahead.
I would like to read some findings into the record for this. So what I'm hearing is that the removal of the tree is in the public interest with respect to the condition of the tree. The tree does possess a safety concern without mitigation. That the removal of the tree is in the public interest with respect to unreasonable existing and potential property damage, and that there are no feasible alternatives to the tree removal and secure for the purposes of the community tree and forest management. And we'll put those findings into the minutes. We'll review at the next meeting. The findings were for denial, so.
Fine.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies things. So with that, we can move then on to item B, which is 216 Central Avenue. Do we have a staff presentation?
Thank you. Application for a design permit, historic alteration permit, coastal development permit, variance, and minor modification for a single-family residence. The project is located at 216 Central Avenue within the single-family residential district. Images of the
Quarters
residence as of today. Located in the Depot Hill neighborhood on the corner of Excellent Drive and Central Avenue. Site is adjacent to other single-family homes, the historic Casablanca apartments, as well as the Inn at Depot Hill. The applicant is proposing first and second-story additions and modifications to the historic primary residence. The proposal does not include modifications to an existing detached garage in the rear. proposed site plan. Additions, both first and second story, are shaded in blue. Our distance from the front elevation along Central Avenue. Additions, total, the proposed project is 2,260 square feet. Floor area, floor area ratio of 50%, 5%. Forms the maximum floor area ratio of 52% of the lot. The existing and proposed elevation side by side, starting with the which show the front or west elevation. Most publicly visible elevation, the applicant is proposing additions which are set behind the ridge of the block gable to create added depth. Most modifications will not be visible from the street level of Central Avenue. Some renderings to show you. Exterior cladding on the additions are horizontal wood flat boards. Boards will be differentiated in width from the original and existing boards in the section. North elevations, which face Escalona Drive, section on the left on the proposed new and modified. Proposed design replaces a previous addition on the rear of this structure. It also replaces a loft portion. The interior side or the south elevation. This is the east side. Applicant has included a number of street renderings. These are both taken from Central Avenue, the one on the left intersection of Central Avenue, just to give you an idea of the main local. This does include a permit. Some of the context behind this home is that it actually used to be 112 Central Avenue. It was located about a block down towards the ocean. That red line indicates where it came from. In 1999, 2000, the city approved an application to relocate and construct additions to this home. It also included a variance to place the detached garage, which is still there. Because of the relocation and of the structural modification, the historic status was in question and subsequently reviewed in 2020 by architectural historian Leslie Gill. Gill found that the siding would still be within the context of the original Hine development era of Depot Hill. This determination was later supported in an attached letter by local historian and former architectural and site committee member Carolyn Collins. Following that and submittals of designs for this addition, architectural historian Seth Burstein provided a preliminary review, which included several recommendations, including reducing the second-story mass and height from 27 feet to 25 feet, beginning the second-story addition behind the ridge of the cross gable, insetting the second-story addition behind the eave line of the original cross gables as viewed from Central Avenue, as well as differentiation of the cladding from the original house to the addition. Subsequent revisions incorporated these recommendations. Following those design changes, Mr. Bergstein found the project in compliance with the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and as well as the California Environmental Quality Act. Variance and minor modification, and sharing the findings from the staff report, but I can also read you what the existing residence is within the minimum front setback and is considered non-conforming. Proposed structural alterations with this project would exceed 8% as described by our calculation and of the present fair market value of the structure. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a variance for the construction cost calculation formula and limitations for non-conforming structures. In relation to the variance request, staff was able to make findings supportive of granting a variance for the non-conforming calculation. Findings A through F are captured on this slide and the next slide. Go through them if you'd like. Findings D. Also includes a request for a minor modification of the covered parking dimensions. Proposed additions exceed 10% of the existing floor area, which requires that the applicant bring the parking into compliance with all development standards for parking. Existing garage is less than the required 10-foot deep or 10-foot wide by 20-foot deep space as is required to meet the covered parking requirement. Because the existing space deviates from the required dimensions by less than 10%, the applicant is seeking a minor modification for the minimum covered parking dimensions. Site plan here shows what the proposed arrangement is of a total of 3 parking spaces. The 2 on the left and the lighter orange are the uncovered spaces, and the one on the darker orange is covered space.
Can I ask you a question about that? Is that any different than the existing parking out there right now? Is the parking being modified at all because of this improvement to the property?
The parking area of the uncovered spaces would be modified. Existing garage and driveway is actually built into. Site plan above shows that arrangement as I described. And for reference as well, because it relates to some of the findings for the minor modification, I have the side, front and rear property line dimensions there showing that the lot is visually tapered down towards the parking area driveway. Moving garage forward, as it cannot be moved backwards, would actually make it difficult in uncovered parking as they currently proposed. That is included in the findings. Now, in relation to the minor modification request, staff was able to make supportive findings for the minimum covered parking dimensions. As with the variance, findings A through F are captured on 2 slides, and the staff recommends the planning commission approve the project based on the findings and commission.
Other questions of staff? Seeing none, let's move on to public comment. Do we have the applicant here wish to speak? Are there any other members of the public wish to speak on this item?
We have 3 attendees on Zoom, and I do not see any hands up.
I will say that the architect is online, if you have any questions.
Yeah, hand just
Okay.
Bridget Esty. You can now speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Bridget Esty. My husband and I have properties on both Escalona Drive and Central Avenue. The property on Escalona Drive looks directly at 216 Central Avenue. And we just wanted to, just for the record, let you know that we do support the improvements, the recommended proposed improvements, and we think they've done a great job of meeting all of the rehabilitation criteria, and look forward to the improvements that they're proposing to make.
Ms. Esty? Anyone else?
So there are no other hands up. There was a hand up, but, oh, here we go. Yep, R. Scott Mitchell. Oh,
Okay, well, if there's no more comments, let's bring it to the council for deliberation. Do you wish to speak on this item?
I have a quick question for staff. I can't ever recall a variance for the construction cost calculations that exceeded 80%. Is this a first?
I believe we've done this before.
Have you?
So, yeah,
If I may,
yes.
I believe it's been done on multiple occasions, but in the staff report that you pulled up, if you like, I believe we referenced 124 Central Avenue, which thematically similar to this project. It was also a historic house, Purple House, as you may know. Control.
Okay. Maybe I wasn't on then, or maybe my memory's failing me.
Yeah. Haven't we done away with that in the new ordinance?
Well, we tried, but we didn't succeed with
Yeah.
that section of the ordinance in the coastal commission, so this is the new method.
Yeah.
Any other comments or
Well,
a motion?
I mean, we've granted variances of all kinds due to historic preservation. That's one of the main reasons that we do that.
And this is an unusually shaped lot.
Yeah, it meets all the requirements. The minor modification is very minor. It's like 1 foot and 1 foot. Fine with me.
Yeah, I think it's nice that the applicant redesigned the project to address the concerns of the historians and set it back behind the roof line, because now it really does look like it fits on the property itself. So I'll make a motion to approve the project with the staff findings and conditions.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Westman and a second by Commissioner Ruth. Are there any other discussions? Comments? Can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Root,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Mayor Wells.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Good luck on your project.
Thank you.
Move on then to item C, 2022 zoning code amendments. Pick up where we left off, I guess.
Thank you. This evening, we have Ben Noble of Ben Noble Planning to finish up where we left off. We are not going to go back and over the whole presentation. We did want to suggest that we open the public hearing early, and then we'll talk through the remaining 4 items. Does that sound like a good idea? To open the
Do we want to
public
go
hearing?
back and do the presentation on the items we didn't talk about, which was,
You know, at the last meeting, Ben presented all of the items, so there's only a few remaining. And Ben, if you wouldn't mind just maybe listing what those remaining items are, and then we can open the public hearing on those items and then get the discussion.
yeah, it's a good idea.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ben, we can.
Great. All right. So just a little refresher. On October 20th, we had the first hearing of these amendments where the Planning Commission provided direction on the first 5 topics of interest on our list. And what staff is requesting tonight is direction on the remaining 5 topics of interest, as well as any other items that the Planning Commission has comments on with the amendments, with the request to make a recommendation tonight to the Planning Commission or to the City Council for them to adopt these amendments. And what we had in mind for the meeting tonight is starting with number 6, EV charging stations, that I would go over the slides again that I presented 2 weeks ago, and then have Planning Commission discussion and direction on that item, and then move on to the next one, generators. I would review the proposed amendments, planning commission would then discuss and provide direction and so on and so forth until we've completed the list. We thought that that was a sensible way to proceed tonight. And I guess we wanted to check with the planning commission and Mr. Chair if that sounds like a good approach.
I think that's a good approach.
We also have to have the public hearing on each item.
So, yeah, so that's the question. And you suggested we do it all at once. I suggest we do topic by topic.
Sure.
Okay.
One attendee on Zoom.
Okay, I have a question. Didn't you talk about electric vehicle charging stations? Because Commissioner Newman talked about how we gotta have something in there that makes it work with state law.
I thought we left it.
That was the ADUs, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ben, go ahead then. And
Oh,
All right,
But we didn't
great.
talk- Excuse me, but we
Sorry,
didn't
go
talk
ahead.
about charging stations because we talked about the size of the screen on them, didn't we?
We did, and
Yeah.
you showed us the thing where they were using the screens for advertising.
Right.
and-
Was this part of questions?
We just
Maybe
asked,
Sarah?
we interrupted and asked questions when he was talking about that, but we didn't have our discussion, is what I recall.
Okay.
Okay.
So go ahead, Ben. Electric
Great.
charging station.
Okay, thank you. So the existing code has language about EV charging stations, and it requires charging stations for new uses with at least 25 parking spaces and additional remodels that increase an existing parking lot by 50 or more, that has 50 or more spaces by 10% or more. So the existing standards are for large parking lots with a lot of spaces. And if the EV charging station requirement is triggered in terms of the number of charging stations, if a lot has 25 to 49 parking spaces, one charging station is required. And then an additional charging station is required for additional increments of 50 additional parking spaces. So again, we're talking about very large parking spaces in or parking lots in shopping centers. And what the proposed amendments say is that the number of EV charging stations is required by the building code, as that's something that evolves over time. And there's also language that limits the size of digital screens to 2 square feet. And there's language that requires screening of parking lots on lots with 6 or more spaces if there's an EV charging station, as would be required for any parking lot. So nothing unique or different or additional for EV charging stations. And so there are alternatives that we've considered. It is possible to specify in the zoning code the number of required charging stations to make sure that's consistent with state law. And then expecting that state law will evolve over time with the building code and the green code, the city would then need to periodically amend the zoning code to make sure that the two are consistent. Another option for the city is to codify the required ministerial process to approve a building permit for the EV charging stations. That's something that's required by recently adopted state law, that cities need to approve these charging stations through a streamlined ministerial approval process. The language for that, if a city does codify it, is typically in the building code and can be very detailed. And I think our preference and recommendation on this is to not codify that process and instead rely on state law to establish that and reference that instead. So, and part of the reason why these proposed amendments are coming before the Planning Commission tonight, particularly about the digital signs, is that there does seem to be kind of emerging interest within the advertising industry to use these EV charging stations as an opportunity for electronic billboard signs. The city has previously received inquiries about whether or not this is permitted and what the approval process would be. And as I previously mentioned, staff's recommendation is to limit the size of digital screens to 2 square feet as a way to prohibit the sort of large digital display advertisements that we're seeing in some communities and that are of interest to the advertising industry. So with that, I would sort of stop my presentation on EV charging stations and turn it back to the Planning Commission.
Without deliberation, are there any questions on his presentation? So now we can move to then the public, if there's any members of the public.
There are no longer any attendants.
Okay, so let's bring it then back to the commission and any comments on this item.
I did want to mention, we did approve an EV charger, 2 EV chargers, I think it's 2, at the mall at Macy's, and they are the large screens. And at the time of approval, it wasn't clear that they'd be utilizing them. I just want to highlight that there are 2 that would be non-conforming as soon as we pass this ordinance, but and that's what we're trying to prevent is they can put Pete's Coffee on there and other advertising. We can, at some point, notify them all and enforce our sign ordinance on those. So there is a way, but we're just really trying to avoid this situation from happening.
I don't understand the objection to the advertising. I would think, well, if you don't like advertising, then just ban it. You know, no 2 by 2 foot screens at all. Just, we don't like advertising. Or if you like it, why not go, what the heck?
Well, you do need a screen because when you go in to charge, you've got to utilize the screen in order to operate.
I see.
Our sign ordinance would actually govern it if we were capable of enforcing our sign ordinance, which I know is difficult.
I'm more concerned about the technology. If people find it lucrative to have the big screens, nobody's going to make a charger with a small screen, so you won't be able to get one, and we'll just have a variance every time someone wants to install one. So I don't even think we should put that provision in there.
You want the big screen?
No, but I don't think we're going to have any control over it. We're at the mercy of what the manufacturers produce.
Right, but I think that the manufacturers are going to produce ones other than the big screens, because there are going to be a number of places that are not going to want to have the big screens, not only us, but you're not going to see.
I don't think it hurts anything to put it in there. I just think we're going to get a lot of variance requests when people can't get that type of charger.
I think we ought to go along with staff's recommendation on the size of the charger, so we don't have the big screens for advertising. I think we ought to incorporate the Cal Green standards. So for the number of stations that need to be, we can, someone can always put in more, but that way we don't have to keep going back and changing the ordinance. And I think parking lots ought to be screened the way we have established screening parking lots now. We shouldn't change it just because some of the parking lots are going to have charging stations in. That's my opinion on the 3 points.
I agree with all of those except for the screen size. I don't have a problem with a big screen personally. So, Ed,
I'm with Susan all the way.
Okay, Courtney.
I think I'm favoring smaller screens too.
Okay, well, I think that's direction enough.
Okay. Recommendation.
Okay. Should I proceed with generators? All right. So generators, we're talking about generators for emergency power during power outages, and the existing code is silent on this matter. And the city has in the past received questions about this, and also there have been installations of generators, and clarity on the rules that apply to generators are something that is, I think, would be beneficial. So the proposed amendments would prohibit generators in the front and the side setbacks of a property, but would allow generators to project 5 feet into the rear setback if necessary, to locate the generator behind the rear building wall. There's also language that limits testing hours to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and would also prohibit freestanding generators to supply service to recreational vehicles or trailers.
Excuse me, Ben, what does testing hours mean? Does that mean running hours?
So that's the time during the day when a generator can be tested. And periodically, a generator does need to be tested. It's actually a requirement of the generator to do that periodically. And what we're saying here is that when it is tested, it can only occur during the time of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
But it could run 24 hours a day.
Well, I think it typically, I think, needs to run for about an hour, is my understanding. We're just saying that you can't test a generator during the evening.
I mean, I can tell you every month when they test the generator here at City Hall from my house. I can tell you every month they test the generator in Shadowbrook. And why shouldn't they do that testing during the daytime rather than at night? I mean, if the generator needs to run, it can run all night, but.
So the testing is noisy? I know nothing about these generators.
Yeah, I think, I brought up the generators once before.
Yeah.
We actually have in our neighborhood a home that's put in a commercial size generator. And it is so noisy when it runs that, it's difficult for people in the neighborhood to sleep. I mean, it's loud. And so my concern about the generators was I thought we ought to have some noise standard for them or require them to soundproof them, because we do now require on commercial developments for people to soundproof their generators. And it seems like in a residential neighborhood, there ought to be some consideration about noise and soundproofing. I'm not real concerned about where the generators go. I'm concerned about the noise that they make.
And so again, let me just pull the thread on this testing thing. So testing is a extra noisy?
It's a maintenance requirement.
No.
Testing is a maintenance requirement that happens.
I'm just wondering, why would you flag this as anything
The
special?
point is that in an emergency use of the generator, you don't have any choice about when you do it. But
Right.
testing, you can do at a time that doesn't annoy people. You can choose when to test, but
I see.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
yeah. But I mean, I think it's nice that we're starting to address this issue, but I don't think this is really a very good solution to the generator noise disturbing the neighbor issue. Just like Commissioner Westman says, I mean.
But we can put levels, acceptable levels, requirements on there. So within our general plan in the residential district, for an occasional disturbance that may happen in a residential district, the allowance is between 60 and 70 dBL. So we were thinking that if you would like to put a limit on this, suggesting 65, and then it'll come at a greater cost when somebody goes to the store to buy their generator. And we tell them it has to be a 65 dBL. I think I found one online today that was $100, but if you can get a much cheaper generator, that's probably better. So,
And you can get generators that are very quiet.
yeah.
I mean, my neighbor on one side of me has a generator, and you hardly hear it when it's running. So I do think it would be nice to have some sort of noise standard in there.
Could you limit it to say when there's power outages? You know, that I would think a lot of people are doing it just because they're worried about, you know, when they lose PG&E or whatever, they want the generator to kick in.
It's when the generator runs for 3 or 4 days straight, and no one can sleep, and it typically happens in the summertime when it's hot and people have windows open. So
those people aren't just responding to a power outage, they're just using it instead of,
typically it's power outages.
And it runs for days.
We had one, I don't think it was last summer, the summer before, in our neighborhood that went for 4 days.
Oh, I guess I've been fortunate.
I think, given the nature of Capitola and the density of Capitola, we should have a noise maximum for sure.
Can we incentivize soundproofing, like providing some type of bunker or putting it within some, you know?
Right, if they buy a noisier one, they can soundproof them.
People, I've known people to bury them in kind of an underground bunker, and it provides a lot of soundproof purposes.
I have a question on just the language of the rear setback. So if it's a non-conforming house that has a 10-foot setback, are you allowed to put the generator within that area?
It says 5 feet into the rear setback, so if the lot is 100 feet deep and there's a 20-foot setback requirement, it would have to be, it could only go 5 feet into it, so there still needs to be 15 feet between the property line and the...
So it's the legal required setback, not a non-conforming setback.
Correct.
Okay. Probably could clarify that on there.
Yes, yes.
So I would be happy with it if we put in the 65 and said if they can't meet that standard, then they need to put in some soundproofing.
Yeah, okay.
And I think another suggestion that I think I heard was to add language that limits the use of the generator to power outages, excluding the testing, the mandatory maintenance, to prohibit somebody from using the generator for an extended period of time during periods when there is not a power outage. Would the Planning Commission like us to add language along those lines?
A nice addition.
I agree.
Can we think of anything else that somebody would need the generator for? I just would hate to limit somebody that needs.
Hey, bouncy house.
Add language about an emergency or a power outage,
Yeah, you could add some language that in an emergency or a power outage, because something could happen at their particular home that requires all the electricity to be turned off, and they want to run a generator.
Okay. Yeah, the emergency is a little broader.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a couple of the applications that we've seen for generators that come into building would be for medical reasons too, that if the power were to go out,
Right.
people who have medical needs, so we want to make sure they're protected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, do people who just want to add a home generator for emergency need to come and get a permit?
They do.
They're supposed to do that.
So that's what we would,
Not quite. You only need it if you're putting in a system where the generator kicks on automatically if the power goes off. A lot of people in my neighborhood have generators that if the power is out for a while, you just run the generator and plug your refrigerator or whatever you want to keep running into it, and those don't need building permits.
But those aren't applicable to this.
No.
Those are portable generators.
So for portable generators, we don't have a permit requirement, but we could still have a sound requirement.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Put them in their front yard.
Yeah.
All right,
So if we were to do that, we would need to make that clear in the amendments, because I think the way it's written right now, it's really for home generators that provide backup electricity in case of a power outage. So if we want it to apply to these portable generators that could be used for other purposes, we'll need to specify that.
Portable generators are used in construction and all kinds of things, so we're going to control that too. I mean, I think we should just limit it to built-in generators, permanently installed.
Why don't we start with the built-in generators?
Yeah, I think this is a work in progress.
That's a good place to start, and if we find the others a real problem, we'll add those in too.
Okay,
Sounds good.
okay. Would you like me to review the direction on this, or are we good to move on to the next topic?
That would be helpful to hear that.
Okay, so the direction is to add a noise standard. So 65 decibels at the property line, and if the generator exceeds that, that it needs to be soundproof to meet the standard. We will limit the use of the generator to power outages or emergencies. And we will clarify that the rear setback is 5 feet into the minimum legal setback, not the existing building wall.
All right.
That sounds right to me.
Okay,
Okay.
great. So we'll move on to minor modifications, which is timely since you had that on your agenda previously. So the existing code allows, with a minor modification, deviation to a physical dimensional standard, such as setbacks of up to 10%, but there are other types of standards which are not eligible for minor modifications. So it's a limited use and availability, and it requires Planning Commission review and approval. The proposed amendment is to allow for Community Development Director action on a minor modification if the project does not otherwise require Planning Commission review. The idea behind this being that if the project involves this minor adjustment to a setback or other similar dimensional standards, and it would not otherwise need to go before the Planning Commission, that this is something that could be acted upon at the staff level. So that's
This is an example.
Yeah, sure, because this is why we had an applicant, actually in the Upper Riverview Terrace neighborhood, come in, wanted to do an addition that would not require Planning Commission review, a small addition off the back of the home. Their garage interior space is substandard, so I want to say it was at like 19 feet 2 inches. In order for them to move forward with the project, I could not allow a minor modification, so therefore it would have to go to the Planning Commission. So, minor modifications are allowed for up to 10% of a measured setback, a driveway dimension. It does not include height limits, so they can never do a minor modification for a height limit. It also does not include density limitation. It's really about measurements in the site plan. And if you wanted to even just make it really specific to just dimensions that I could sign off on, that's another way to approach this. If you always wanted to see if there was, like, someone could come in for a 10% minor modification to the front yard setback, and if you wouldn't want me to be able to make a decision on that, then specify exactly what. But it can only go up to 10%.
Under circumstance where you would determine that that wasn't an appropriate use of that 10%?
So, yeah, I think so. If there's a streetscape in which all the houses are set back at the 15 feet, like that's really asking for a variance, you know, if someone's in that variance area. And I also, the way it's drafted, I could bring it to Planning Commission. So if there were one that I didn't feel comfortable with, that I think it qualified as minor.
So if someone wanted on a 40 by 80 lot, instead of a 16-foot rear setback, a 14-foot setback would be a minor modification?
It's only up to 10%, so it would be, they could get a 1 foot.
Would be, well, 10% of 20 feet would be 2 feet.
Yeah.
So instead of a 20-foot setback, it would be an 18-foot setback.
Mm-hmm. So they could ask for that.
But they can come, I mean, like the one that was on Riverview, it just came on a consent calendar to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, so
Doesn't seem like,
my concern about this is, especially with setbacks, is occasionally these are issues to neighbors. And it may just be that they're using the setback because there's something about the change that they're not too happy about and they want to, so if it's just an administrative decision, a staff decision, the neighbors really don't get any input in it or opportunity to be heard. So, I'm kind of would prefer just to limit it to the parking issue.
I think that's what.
I could go along with just limiting it to the parking issue.
Yeah, my concern is we keep embedding in our zoning ordinance all these avenues and runs around our requirements.
So the best one was Dennis Norton's building down there at the corner of Stockton, and where it was taller than, there was no variance, but it was something to do with the mechanical equipment or something.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Some deviation, it was some other, yeah.
Okay, so driveway,
So just the dimensions of the parking space. is what-
Dimensions of parking spaces, limited to that. Otherwise, it stays the same.
Yeah, comes to the planning commission.
sounds good.
So to make sure I have this right, so this list here, which you may, hopefully you can see okay, this is when a minor modification is allowed. And what we're saying is that if it's for number 1 here, and there's no other need for planning commission review, the director could act on this, but all others would need to continue to go to the planning commission. Is that correct? Okay. Okay.
And when you're adding community benefits and minor modifications, and
Yeah.
the project just keeps growing and growing.
All right. So are we good on minor modifications? We can move on?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So second story decks and balconies. Currently, a second story deck and balcony requires a design permit. And the existing code prohibits upper story multifamily decks and balconies when abutting R1. And this is part of the newly adopted objective standards for multifamily and mixed use residential development. And also the existing code excludes second story decks and balconies from the floor area ratio calculation. And the amendments that are in the packet tonight include new standards for second story decks and balconies in R1 and RM parcels abutting R1. And these standards address orientation, minimum property line setbacks, maximum projections from the building wall. And there's also language with some changes to the FAR rule. And the packet amendments would include in the FAR calculation a second story deck or balcony that is covered or enclosed on 2 or more sides, but would continue to exclude the second story deck or balcony from the FAR calculation if it's uncovered and open on 3 sides. So for example, this balcony deck in this photograph would be excluded under the in the FAR calculation. And so following the proposed language being shared in the packet, staff has thought about this a little bit more, received some feedback, and we would like to present to you a slightly revised recommendation on this issue. One of the revisions, or probably the biggest change to what is in the packet is, and hopefully you can see this okay, A on the screen, which would revert back to the rule in the old code prior to the adoption of the updated code. And what the old code required was that if a uncovered upper floor deck and a covered exterior open space, if it's more than 150 square feet, it would be included in the FAR calculation. But if the deck or balcony is less than 150 square feet and it's uncovered, then it would not be included in the FAR calculation. So that's part of our revised recommendation tonight. And then the other, excuse me?
I can answer that. I don't think we had as many issues with upper story decks under the old code. And I think that's because they counted towards your floor area ratio. The new code, upper story decks don't currently count towards your floor area ratio, but I think bringing back the old standard of just capping the allowance at 150 square feet. Otherwise, it counts towards.
So what was the rationale for removing decks from the floor area ratio to begin with?
The original was to allow more articulation in the buildings and more variation in the form and design, but what we're finding is the impacts are, the neighbors are large, and they tend to be doing larger decks in the rear yard, so that was why I suggested that maybe we just go back to the way we used to do it, because we didn't seem to have as many proposals for really large decks.
So the problem really is this is one of the conflict-ridden issues we see as planning commissioners, because one neighbor wants a deck and the other neighbor wants privacy, right? So it doesn't really address it head on, but you're saying that the former ordinance seemed to work better.
Having a limitation related to FAR helps. So we're not only recommending A, we're recommending A with B and C. So also spend a few, and we'll then walk through B and C. But so it's a new package of, let's put a new FAR limit on it that allowing up to 150 square feet, but then also rear yard setback of 25% of the lot, front setback of 20 feet, and then on the interior and exterior, a 10-foot setback. So it actually has to like step in further away from the neighbor's property.
Are there any illustrations of what's allowed that we can look at?
So the applicant comes in and meets all these standards. The neighbor comes in and says, "This is an invasion of my privacy." So are we, under this new proposal, if the applicant meets the dimensional requirements, the applicant have the right then to have that second-story deck?
It still requires a design permit, in which there are privacy standards in the review.
So it gets us right back in the same problem.
But it does, I like the idea, I mean, the thing that bothers me about the whole deck issue is it's so subjective. And, you know, it's like, well, I think it really is gonna bother that neighbor, it's not gonna bother this neighbor. You know, we approved one up on Depot Hill, because, you know, on the Fonce's house remodel, but it was sort of there. And so I would like to see us, I like the idea of coming up with some standards which says, you know, if you meet these standards, then you're entitled to have your deck. If you don't meet these standards, then,
Don't we have to take the design aspect out then?
For the design permit?
Well, I mean, I sort of agree with what Commissioner Westman's saying, is that if you meet the requirements that we're going to enact here, you have a right to your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were saying, well, there's still a design permit, and the design permit gives the planning commission discretion to deny it if they feel like it, because the neighbor complains.
Wouldn't it be just like anything else, like a 25-foot height requirement? Well, you meet that, it's good, but we still go review it and say, oh, I don't like that, look at that house.
it's contextual. Yeah, design review still looks at the overall design of the house. But I don't think, I think they would have a pretty good argument, like, I get to be 25 feet tall because that's what I'm allowed in the zoning district, I get to have my deck because this is what I'm allowed in the zoning district. I think it would make it clearer for us all.
You help me a lot, you know, in terms of reviewing these.
Is there specific criteria for the privacy?
There is criteria for privacy in our design permit, but it's not like objective standards of you can't have a deck within 10 feet of a window. You know, it's not.
It's pretty vague.
It's just.
It seems with the increased setbacks, it seems it's trying to limit the line of sight to, you know, curtail neighbor conflicts, but it seems kind of unfortunate if you have two houses that are backing up to each other and nobody cares if they have the second story deck and then they're limited by that.
But I think we have to look at the long term. It doesn't matter who lives there right now. What matters is, you know, long term, because houses change hands all the time. It's, you know, what kind of standards are we going to have in our community as far as privacy and decks go? I mean, you shouldn't get what your neighbor objects. You should be able to have your deck if you meet the standards. If your neighbor doesn't object, doesn't mean you get a much bigger deck.
Solution is to ban second-story decks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
We've heard that before.
I've got a question on this.
So, yeah, for this slide, at the top of the slide is the street, the main street. This is the corner lot, and then there's the side street. The box that you're seeing is what would be allowed for this, like the allowed setbacks for a second story on a building. So what you're seeing is what the footprint of the second story of the building could be. In the hatched area, that's where the deck could be. So the deck on the second story can go as far as the structure on the second story for the front yard of the facing the street, and then also the side street yard. But then there's an increased setback between homes of 10 feet, so the deck couldn't be right out where at the wall where the second story is allowed to extend to. And then in the rear yard, your rear yard requirement is 20% for a setback, and the deck would be at 25%. So it'd be more inset under this ordinance if we were to modify it.
But I'm confused here. Are we allowing then, if they meet the requirements, second-story decks on the interior side of a lot that faces the neighbor?
They would have to be inset 10 feet. So they couldn't be within 10 feet of the property line.
But you could still have a deck on the side of your house on the second story.
That only applies to roof decks.
I'm
That's
sorry,
okay.
Ben, we have language in there also that it can't be faced towards the interior lot line. It can't face the interior lot line.
I thought we had that in there.
Yeah, that is in the packet language. I think what we're coming to you tonight with is an alternative recommendation to eliminate that statement, which we're concerned is problematic.
That probably should remain in our recommendation, that first item. I'm sorry that I didn't clarify that earlier. So I think the idea was not to allow decks on the interior side.
So in that diagram, the only place that a deck would be allowed is either on the front or the rear, correct?
Or the exterior side.
Or the interior if they were on a corner
Corner lot.
So now, wait a minute. So then that diagram is wrong. So you can't have a deck on, that's a lot line, right? That dashed line on the left?
Correct, you can't, we're
So
saying you can't have a deck on that side.
Well, it says you can. Oh, I see, because it's a dashed line. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So if we bring back that A, which says you can't face the interior side, you can have a deck along that between two homes, but you could have it off the back of the home.
Right.
Or anything looking towards it.
And was that requirement still in there that requires like a rear yard deck, second-story deck to be set back within that second story, have walls on the side of it to protect the view off to the
This
side?
could essentially get you there. It would be more inset, it has greater setbacks. and it has a greater rear yard setback, so it would have to be inset. Doesn't say specifically.
So they're not
that-
required, but the potential is
The
there.
potential is there, yeah.
So wait a minute, so let me pull the string on that. So, you have a rear, second story balcony in the rear, and see, we're limited with the square footage, I guess. So it can only go 6 feet out, is that it?
Yeah.
So in other words, so you couldn't inadvertently have one facing the neighbor because you'd only have 6 feet on the side that would potentially face it.
Yes, off the back.
Off the back. Okay, I get it.
I don't think about requiring on that interior side of a rear yard deck a 6-foot wall. Protect that privacy looking towards the other property.
If you're requiring walls, doesn't that count against you towards FAR requirements? Because it's saying.
It would just be on the one side. Well, I guess it'd be on the both sides because if it was a house in the middle of the lot, middle of the block, you'd have to do it on both sides. And so then would that count against your FAR because you got walls on both sides?
It won't make a difference, it's only 150 square foot.
Yes.
To me, I'm not the one who complains about second-story decks, so you guys need to decide whether or not you need walls.
I agree with you that to encourage visual obstacles so you can't see your neighbors is a good idea. I just really disagree with the whole FAR counting it into the massing of the home, just because if you provide all these limitations for increased setbacks and, obstacles, visual obstacles, I feel like that's a lot of requirements, and then actually trying to pull square footage out of the home to compensate for, outdoor space, it just seems, I don't know, you're losing a lot of what the home could be, so you're gonna reduce the size of your bedrooms or the bathrooms to then, allow yourself a little bit of outdoor space, but you're already providing so many obstacles, provisions for your neighbors.
But if you were designing a house for yourself, that would be a decision you'd have to make.
Right.
Where do you want to utilize the space?
I totally agree with you. My only prerogative is that when you have 2,500 square feet to work with, say, and you get a 150 square foot credit to put on a second story deck. And I think that was actually not just 150 square feet, but that counted any outdoor space, like an enclosed porch or anything in the previous code. And so you had to distribute that 150 square feet in all these different places, and it really ran out quickly. So now you don't have a lot of area to work with for the second story deck or any outdoor space in general. So I just kind of felt that trying to pull it out of the house is really taking away from the charm of each design.
I think for me, I'm comfortable with if you get 150 square feet. If you go beyond that, it counts in your FAR. So the 150 square feet
On the second story or all?
is free, right? The way you're proposing
The
it.
second story, or does that include patios?
So Ben, can you pull up the
No,
one?
those are
So
for-
uncovered
those-
upper floor deck and covered exterior open space in excess of 150 square feet. Included.
Like
Upper floor deck.
Yeah.
And we could add something about front porches not being included in that.
If the 150 square feet could only be used for the upstairs or the second story decks, I don't like it, but I think it's still, it'd be better than trying to split it with your front porch and your upstairs deck.
Not really what it says that way, is it?
Yes, but they're referring to a previous code,
Oh,
and that's, the previous code, specified that you had all these different places to put it.
I mean, for me, I'm somebody who could go along with Commissioner Roos and just ban second story decks because I think I think they're a problem of things. I'm particularly in Capitola with the size lots that we have. I really could go that way. So I'm trying to step back from that a little bit and come up with a scenario that, for me, will provide some assurances of privacy and setbacks for the neighbors, will sort of put the planning commission in a place where we won't be deciding, individually whether they should or shouldn't, or do we like this house or not like that house. It takes all of that out of it. We're going to have, a set of rules. This is how it works. So, for me to go along with it, I think we would need to keep A in there, because we don't want people building enormous decks, which, someone might decide that that's what they want to do. And I don't think there should be decks on the interior between houses. I don't think 10 feet's quite enough. And, the other standards work for me. And I'm not, in all honesty, so concerned about having a wall put up, because I think that Katie's right. It will evolve that way, because it's got to be set back in the building itself. So.
We've required that in the past. Up on, was it McCormick? Loma, one of those houses up there?
Recently on Monterey.
Monterey.
Yeah, we required that. I just think that should be a provision in there. If you're going to have a rear deck, it needs to have privacy walls.
I can go, I can go along with that.
Okay. I wouldn't go along with that, but I think I'm a minority about the decks in general. Well, I tend to agree with Courtney in terms of the second-story deck is a great feature, not only architecturally, but living space. And, the notion of you having to limit that and take that out of your floor area ratio, that kind of limits your design. And people don't like decks because you can see in somewhere in their backyard, grow a tree or something, I just don't, you got to live with people.
We're split all over the place here, because this is a irreconcilable conflict between.
It's okay, there's compromise,
Okay.
there's a compromise. I think that I would be okay with the way that it's written if we can just make sure that the 150 square feet is dedicated to upstairs or level.
Second story?
Thank you. Yes. Because, just to make sure that,
Upper floor decks, yeah.
just so it doesn't get.
Be clear, in the past, the covered exterior open space, we would utilize this towards first story covered porches. So, to Courtney's point, a lot of times when you're trying to utilize this exception and max out your FAR, it's hard to,
Right, so what she's asking for, the way I understand it, is that the 150 square feet can be for an upper, second-story deck, and we would have an additional 100 square feet for features like front porches.
That's in my interpretation. I'm sorry to of course, but in my interpretation, I just feel like it's important for the charm of Capitola. That's where, in designing houses in this town, you want to have the porch. You want to have the rear yard, overhangs, all those things, and you don't want to be limited on that by taking space away from the actual living, usable space inside the house.
Right. So if you added, so really what you're doing is we're adding an additional 150 square feet that's not going to be counted. So you could do the front porch and you still have 150 square feet for your second floor deck.
I don't know if there's limitations on the first story just doesn't seem to make sense. But the second story is what we're talking about, if we 150 square feet.
Ben, did you just make a revision to?
I did just make a revision And I think there may be, let's see. And I wanted to see if this is what the majority is leaning towards. Uncovered upper floor decks in excess of 150 square feet is included in the FAR calculation.
Right, so we're not dealing with front porches, they're no, we're just dealing with balconies and decks right now.
Right.
Why would we allow a deck of more than 150 square feet, since there's such a problem?
What if you had two upper floor decks on two
You can't have them on the sides of the home.
and not side and side, but like maybe a little bit in the front, a little bit in the back, if that's where they're allowed.
You can do that, it just
You can do
reduces
that,
your
it's
FAR.
just that if they exceed 150 square feet, then it gets down in floor
Mhm.
area ratio.
Well, do we have to worry about massing at this point? I mean, how, 150 square feet is not a lot?
Is it 6 feet, the max the deck can
Yeah,
protrude?
it's 6 feet, so like
25.
So that's,
20. No, you could get like a.
so the setback area of the second story is 4 feet.
About 150.
it's
So-
25, it could be 25 feet wide, 25 foot wide deck by, but if you think about, if you have a front deck also on the front of a home, yeah, it could be a 6 by 25.
So backyard deck, just if you want to put it all in the backyard.
If you want to put it all in the right.
It could be 25 by 6 feet. Or it could be 12 by 12.
But it can't.
But it has to be set back, so
It can be halfway into your house.
halfway into your house.
Crazy design.
Well,
It has a larger setback than the rear wall, so.
so it can't extend beyond that hatched area then, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, and we need to change on B, number 3, because they're not going to be allowed at all on the interior, side yard between houses.
I would say leave it just so that we make sure on the backyard, there's that inset of 10 feet. So if they're extending, but we'll add a point about that they can't be facing the interior side
Right.
yard.
I like the 10-foot setback in the rear yard, that's a very good point. But we need to say that we don't allow them between houses.
Correct.
So I added the language that's in the packet. And I think what I'm hearing is to make sure that this stays in the amendment. So a second story deck or balcony may not face an interior side parcel line abutting a lot with a single family dwelling.
I'd still like to include language about privacy walls, but I think I might be in the minority.
No, I could go with privacy walls, I think you got 3 people who go with privacy walls.
Could we try to say, and remove the word uncovered? Would it be covered? Because argued if you have privacy walls, maybe you would want to incorporate it into the massing of the house if it's set back so far into the setback.
You mean if you cover it?
Yeah, like if it's set back into the setback, or increased into the massing of the house.
So you just extend the roof line over it?
Just a little bit, so you have like, you know, a nice sheltered area that's partially shaded, or if you put a trellis that's connected to the deck, to the house, that could be considered covered. If we remove the uncovered word, and it just says upper floor deck in excess of 150 square feet, that would make it so it would be more incorporated into the massing of the house. And we could incorporate privacy panels.
And did you hear that, so for point A, to remove the word uncovered? have the upper floor decks in excess of they are. Building setbacks are required, 25% on the rear, 20 on the front, rear and street side 10 feet. One-story deck or balcony may not project further than
Can you blow that up so we can read it?
You want to add something about privacy?
No, I wanted to see if there's anything in there on privacy.
A second-story deck or balcony may not face an interior side parcel line abutting a lot. And privacy screening shall be required on interior side.
Screening, that could be somebody putting up a couple plants. No,
Or, okay, so a privacy wall.
Yeah.
Privacy wall.
Required.
So frosted glass wouldn't count? That's not a wall?
That's a wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
So privacy wall required in which circumstances?
Required, on the side of the deck along the, parallel to the interior side parcel line.
I would think privacy screening would be okay, because, what about a trellis? If you had one of those crosshatch
I
trellis
could
running?
put up a couple potted plants and say that's a screen.
Well, so the screen would be something you debate, and the staff would say that doesn't count,
Yeah.
because it's not part of the structure.
But a wall's not debatable.
I'm not in support of that, but I may be a minority here.
Oh, it's
How
not
about
for a wall?
privacy screen? Privacy screen would work, because then we would have to, they would have a permanent privacy screen. A plant's not a permanent privacy screen.
There you go, permanent privacy screen. That way, it gives them a little leeway.
Just tell me what that would look like. What's a permanent privacy screen?
It's similar to the application on Monterey that they were proposing privacy screens, right? They had several examples. One was, the trellis. One was a glass that you could.
Oh, the opaque glass.
I do think it needs the word permanent, because I hear your point with that.
Mm-hmm.
Louvered wood or something.
And it would be installed, so.
Okay.
Okay?
So,
Second deck? No.
so, in what case,
Could we open the public hearing on this?
So right now, we're just talking about R1 and multi-residential. Right? We haven't gotten to talking about decks and roof decks for commercial
Correct.
projects.
Correct.
Okay.
And when you say the interior side, when we have a lot that's in the center of the block, don't you need a different terminology than the interior side?
Well, there's street side and interior side, so in the middle of the block, you're gonna have two interior sides.
Okay, they're both called
And then they would-
interior.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they would both have screening. I think it's important for the screening requirement to, tie that to a rear deck only.
Mhm.
On a front deck, we're not saying.
Yeah.
Oh, good point.
so for a rear deck, this is not great to do this in a PDF, but so for a rear deck that is facing a rear parcel line abutting a single family dwelling, is that when a privacy screen is required?
Yes.
Okay. So a permanent privacy screen, example opaque glass, is required for a rear deck facing a parcel line abutting a lot with a single family dwelling.
I don't think that quite captures it, because I think it's, the screening is supposed to be neighbors, so it's for that adjacent property line, not like on the back of the deck, right? It's not to face, so it's on the side of the deck so that you can't look into your neighbor to the side.
You guys want to wordsmith this
Yeah,
later?
we can.
Okay.
I've got it,
But Katie, you've got it?
yes. But it has to be on the side of the deck, it's not on the rear portion of the deck, so
Okay.
I'll send it to you. You can send me this, I'll send you a, okay, so I guess does that look reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we're real close on that.
All right, are we ready to move on to roof decks?
So how are we doing? We okay? Keep going, are we okay with that?
I'm fine.
All right, keep going.
Okay. All right, so roof decks currently require a design permit. And in the
Can you blow
newly,
it up a little bit?
oh, sorry. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. So currently requires a design permit. And in the newly adopted objective standards, roof decks are prohibited on multifamily development that abuts R1. And so the proposed amendments add a new roof deck definition and would also prohibit roof decks in R1 and any parcel abutting R1. Would require 5-foot setbacks from the building wall closest to the property line. Would allow for railings to project above the maximum building height and limits structures within a roof deck only to structures that are needed to access the roof deck from below. So that's the proposed amendments, and I can pull them up on the screen as well if we want to look at them in detail.
One question we had here is, in the village, this comes up with a few roof decks, and I've heard concerns over the years about the roof decks. Safety, we've had code enforcement calls, and also from the planning commission of whether or not to be able to design with a roof deck. And right now, it's not protected in terms of, there's other areas, if there are areas of town that you would like to prohibit roof decks, it would be appropriate to know that now. One item that I do want to raise is that in the hotel design that we did see for the hotel in the village, there was a second-story roof deck that would be, in my opinion, very appropriate. So I think if there is a desire to prohibit roof decks, it'd be good to tie it to residential uses or make an exception for hotels, because that, that was a tiered deck that came down. That was a nice element that I hate to prohibit.
Yeah, but that was what they claimed as a community benefit that was built over public property.
Right.
So I have a couple of, first of all, we are prohibiting these next to an R1 district. And we just approved a hotel up by the post office that's next to an R1 district with a roof deck. So, and if you look at our zoning ordinance for the commercial areas, an amazing amount abuts R1 districts. And you look at Capitola Avenue, Capitola Road, everything abuts an R1 district. So we're really saying that
So you might as well approve them for R1s as well.
you can't, no, I don't want to go there.
Oh, okay.
And, we talk about the hotel in the village, and the second floor deck that they were proposing, to me, was not a roof deck, because it was not a deck up on the roof. And the last thing we want to do is have a deck on the roof of that hotel, because then it will really impact the people who live on Depot Hill above it. We're very concerned about the height of the hotel to begin with. So, I'm sort of talking in circles, but I don't think there should be roof decks in the village. I don't think they work in that area.
Which is an R1, so we're not really dealing with that as it's written.
So, but she asked if there are other areas.
But we're
No.
saying that you can't have any roof decks that abut next to an R1 district. So, yeah, I guess that's fine with me, though. We did just approve one. And, she asked about the village area. I have a hard time with them in the village area because it's so expensive.
Well,
I'll stop.
I'm trying to think, I kind of overlooked the village. And I'm trying to think, I can't imagine any roof decks. I don't see any.
I think the remodel down at the end of Terrace Way just had one,
Yeah, there are roof decks down there.
but that's, Terrace Way is that R1 or is that the CV zone? I'm not sure.
I thought
Sorry.
Terrace Way was the central village, but residential overlay district.
So how about Riverview as you get closer to Stockton? Isn't that CV?
It's CV until you get to,
Yeah, so that's a lot of, I mean, that,
yeah.
do we want, so they're okay there, the way this would read? Rooftop decks would be okay, and there are several.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of roof decks.
Like, what is the,
I mean, it's not that, I actually don't.
Yeah. I think that roof decks have a potential to carry noise a long distance, because they're up high, we all know, noise goes like that. I don't see, I don't see a reason to have them on very small parcels that are so close together. I think they have the potential of being a real noise issue.
And it is our nightly rental zone, so that factors in with noise and, use down in the village for all the residential, to allow rooftop.
Vacation rental.
Vacation rental,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're addressing it in the in not the most important area, actually, of the city. I don't know if I'm for them or against them, but if we're going to prohibit them, it seems like the area we would prohibit them in would be the vacation rental areas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of.
Yeah. So if they were prohibited in the CV zone, allowed in the other multifamily residential zones, but not those parcels that abut R1 zones, I don't know, is that a problem? I'm not sure.
The other suggestion for the abutting R1 zones is that you could say that they need to be oriented towards the street, kind of similar to what we just did, so that the rooftop deck, and in the example of the hotel also, it wasn't, oriented towards the R1, it has to be.
I mean, personally, I think the rooftop deck that we approved on the hotel is gonna ultimately be a problem. It's gonna be, coming back, because you can't have it there and not have noise for the
That's done.
residential neighborhood.
I bet it's never utilized.
So let's take Cliffwood Heights. I mean, that's what we're addressing in terms of you can't have a rooftop deck in Cliffwood Heights, but that's the one place where nobody has a rooftop deck or, I mean,
Right,
it's not an issue.
right.
Yeah.
So no one objects to this.
Yeah. We don't even need it.
So this is fine with me, except I don't think it deals with the village, and I think we need to deal with the village.
Just add a prohibition in the CV zone.
That works for me.
How about everywhere?
Fine with me.
Fine with me. I don't think we need rooftop decks. And I think,
That's fine. I think we just should address it in some form.
Yeah.
Okay,
But-
so no rooftop deck.
Yeah, well, we really want to just, I think we're being a little hasty here. We're talking about our residential. I think we can all kind of agree that in residential zones, that, yeah, you don't want a rooftop deck.
No, I can't agree with that. Yeah, Cliffwood Heights is my best example.
And you think rooftop decks are okay there?
What's wrong with it? Yeah, 6,000 square foot lot.
Rooftop, okay.
Nobody
Well-
does it because they don't, they have backyards and.
So that, I mean, my point is that we're discussing the R1 zone, and now you're saying, well, should we be concerned about all these other zones? Well, I haven't really thought about all those other
Well,
zones.
the roof decks, we're not talking about R1 zones, are we?
No.
We're
No, they're not
talking- they're not allowed in the R1 zone.
For multifamily.
We're talking about the multifamily and commercial zones.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of looking at it case by case. Like you pointed out, we approved the hotel. Well, why did we? I mean, we looked at it and said, well, that's reasonable to have a rooftop deck there, and it abuts a residential zone, and it's so to have just a blanket statement that says they're prohibited just is inconsistent with how we've ruled in the past.
Yeah. I think if you take my suggestion just to add a prohibition in the CV zone, that probably accomplishes what we need to accomplish.
I agree with that. I could live with that.
So just prohibit in the CV zone, and
And leave this in place here the way this is written. But it's not next to an R1 zone, not next to.
not in a R1 zone.
In an R1 zone or next to an R1 zone.
Okay, so then, is that consensus from everyone?
That-
To
yeah.
roof the central village?
Okay.
Fair enough.
That's a big change, but I'm in favor of it.
Okay,
I will object.
So it sounds like the direction is the amendment as proposed with the addition to prohibit roof decks in the mixed-use village zone.
Yes, correct.
Got it. Okay, so that concludes the items that we highlighted. I think we also wanted to provide an opportunity for there to be any additional discussion or comments about any other proposed amendments that we did not highlight.
I only had one, and that was that, and I've lost it, I had it out here. The map that shows the Riverview Terrace neighborhood, just had it right here, what did I do with it? It's, I think Katie can find it for me, we talked about this earlier.
I saw it just a few seconds
I
ago.
got this a few seconds ago. It doesn't match the, oh, here it is.
Page number?
Page 5 of 143 or page 203, I don't know which one. It's, figure 17.16-1 Riverview Terrace.
Got it.
I just think this map should conform to the single-family zoning. You'll notice, there's a lot on Oak where it comes in, and I walked up and looked at that property. I don't particularly know why that job goes in there. So I would just like you to look at this map and see if it can be cleaned up so it's more consistent to the boundary line. The little jogs didn't make any sense to me.
There are quite a few of them.
Yeah, some.
There's a couple parcels on Capitola Avenue. I know that one, that little indentation, that's all one parcel from Capitola Avenue.
It's not.
It's not anymore?
It's not anymore. And, there's a little apartment complex here, but it accesses off of Oak. You know, I think there's 3 sort of little.
I know there used to be one
right there.
parcel.
Yeah, it's not anymore. And I think the same thing is true with this sort of jog down here. You know, this is off the river. Why does that jog in there? Because
Where's Blue gone?
So can we give staff an action just to review
yeah,
that?
just to review the map and make certain it's accurate.
Okay, figure 17.16-1.
Okay.
Our math specialist has taken this.
Okay.
Okay. Any other items?
Zoning comments.
Broad question. I'm gonna pass on it.
Pass for now. Okay, let's move on then. Let's call that a wrap then. We'll move on to.
Oh, wait, I got one.
Oh.
On page 53, there's a comment about, planting of invasive species is prohibited, talking about, you know, landscape planting. And my question was, who's going to determine what is an invasive species and how is that going to be monitored? So I think we should either take that out. You know, we talked about in other places, we suggest native landscaping and that, but since there's no official list of what is an invasive species, I think a lot of people consider ivy an invasive species, and it's planted all around town and others. So that was on page 53. I think that should come out.
I agree with Susie very much.
I actually had a couple more, but.
And no, they won't let you put agave cactus.
Agave cactus?
Yeah, it's just invasive rumors
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, you know, I think if you don't have a list and a big list, then it gets a little vague.
It's a higher battle.
Sorry that I'll shut up.
Thank you.
And Peter.
Well, I do have a particular grudge against English green ivy, but
We all have our plants we don't like.
all right, let's move on then to the director's report, item 6.
Oh, so I want to make sure I have the invasive species. So what page and section that is that?
Okay, well,
53.
53, but that was on the original packet we got.
It's in the landscape section, because we moved all the information on landscaping to the one section. I think it came out of our coastal overlay zone. So, it's a red line in the landscaping.
This is specific for the visitor serving properties?
It was, but we put it in our new, when we
Okay.
consolidated everything in the landscape chapter, it shows up.
Okay. So there's a statement says the planting of invasive plant species is prohibited. And so the direction is to remove that sentence?
Correct.
So I don't have page 53 here. Could you just, so the idea here is no one can, the idea before was that anywhere in the city of Capitola, you're not allowed to plant an invasive species, and now we're removing that.
No, what it was that the Coastal Commission had required in the coastal visitor serving district, there be this statement that no invasive species are allowed. And when they consolidated the landscaping, they took that from the Coastal Commission's requirement and now made it a city requirement, and I'm saying, I don't think we want to have that requirement.
Okay, I understand now and agree. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, the sentence is, the planting of invasive plant species is prohibited, and we're gonna strike that.
Yeah.
Any other points of clarification that you need, Ben?
No, but do we need the planning commission to take action and make a formal recommendation?
We do, we need a formal recommendation for recommended changes to the city council for first reading.
We need a motion to recommend that these comments be forwarded to the city council?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Westman and a second by Commissioner Ruth to have a roll call vote on the recommendations to move these to the city council.
Commissioner Christensen? Aye. Commissioner Newman?
Aye.
Commissioner Root?
Aye.
Commissioner Westman?
Aye.
Chair Wilk?
Aye. So now can we move to the director's report? Let's do that. All right. Item 6.
So first, this is a little bit out of order, but I did want to introduce Liliana to you. Liliana is our new office coordinator at the front desk and just a great asset to our team. Our previous deputy city clerk decided to move on from the city, and so she's helping us out while we're doing a recruitment. And so Liliana, thank you for being here. And then for my director's report, I have quite a few updates for you. So this week, we kicked off the housing element and hosted stakeholder meetings. So we had a series of 8 meetings over the past 2 days via Zoom, and we had some really great participation from our business community, real estate community, local housing advocates, a lot of different groups. So got some great feedback on what our biggest issues are regarding housing and suggestions for how things should go. So I will be bringing the housing element like kickoff to the Planning Commission and the City Council come January of next year. That's when the new council is seated. Second update is there's a new revenue stream for affordable housing. It's called the PLHA funding. It's the Permanent Local Housing Allocation Fund through the state. This is part of SB2, which passed, I think, I want to say back in 2019, might have been 2018, but there was a $75 real estate transaction fee that is attached to all real estate transactions, and the state has been collecting that money, and it looks like our first 3 years of collections have been great, and it's almost adds up to $500,000 for the city of Capitola. It's for real estate transactions that happen within your city limits. So we're, next week at City Council, will be moving forward with applying, but that money can be used for 10 different types of affordable housing projects. We're suggesting that our City Council put that towards being able to produce more affordable housing, and so that with this funding stream, we'll be actually able to work with our local nonprofits and developers and provide some funding to help. Third is our pre-approved ADU design. It went through the building process, and it took a while of back and forth going through the building review and getting them all up to code. We now have 5 building-approved ADUs. I updated our website yesterday. There's now a new ADU page. So on the left-hand side, you can click on the ADU, and there's the new guide is available, as well as the 5 pre-approved ADU plans. So thank you for all your work on that. On our next meeting, December 1st, I'm going to be bringing to you a director's report. I'll have an arborist report regarding the tree out front of City Hall. It's doing quite a bit of damage to the sidewalk.
No way.
Threatening the building. I will say it's one of my favorite trees. It's a great shade in my office. And it will be missed. But sadly, we have to bring that forward to you. But I'll be providing an arborist report at the next meeting. And we'll also be looking at the calendar for 2023 at our next meeting. At City Council, we'll be asking whether or not they would like an earlier start time, earlier than 7. So that's something I'll also be asking the Planning Commission. So if you just about that over the next month, and Casey Roberts earlier. And at our last meeting, we talked about paper, and with these really large items wanting paper, I did want to get some feedback on plans. In the past, we used to ask every applicant to bring in 7 copies of full-size plans, and we would distribute them to your houses with the agendas. Since COVID and going digital, we've only required 2 sets of plans. There's not as much paper in our office anymore, but it's really for your benefit. If you'd like to be looking at the large plans, we're happy to make that a requirement again.
I would say the only concern I have on the digital ones, when you go to expand them, at least on my iPad and my iPhone, they won't let you do that. They revert back or they flip over.
Right.
So you can't expand them to look at detail.
Yeah, I have difficulty reading them sometimes because they're so small, and I keep trying to make them bigger, and I can't figure out how to make them bigger
Are you
in
both
form
on
that.
iPad or?
Yeah.
I use an iPad and a MacBook. And neither one of them can I get it to make them bigger. So I don't know if that's just the format they're being sent to us as. You know, if I could blow it up so I could look at some of the details, then I wouldn't need the big paper plans.
I don't need all the plans.
Okay.
I mean, if I have a problem seeing something, I can come in and look at it.
Yeah. There is, when you're on our website, there's a couple different ways to access the plans, and you really Zoom. So when you're on our website, if you go down to agendas in minutes, and here, so there's different packet types. There's the agenda packet, which is, this would be a PDF.
Right.
If you go to this HTML agenda packet, this is where we all like to go just to get directly to the staff report or the exhibits without having to scroll through the whole packet. So anything in blue you can highlight and then look at.
Did that.
Have you been to this, been using this? So I was hoping that maybe if you go directly to the plan, it would alleviate the issue because it's not tied to the whole agenda packet. I would suggest trying that, but it sounds like you've already been utilizing.
You know, I haven't, I usually go to the packet through the email that gets sent to me.
Okay.
I do too, but I mean, I can.
So then here on the HTML, you'll have the option to really zoom in or zoom out. So.
Okay, no, that's good to know. That'll help. Please help me.
And then we are trying to resolve that if you do a query for the zoning code or muni code, that would come up more easily. I'm also going to show you this. When you're at the city website, the muni code is here as a button.
Right.
So,
The difficulty on my iPad is when it comes up, the buttons are below the screen, the visual. So until Mick pointed it out to me, I know I'm slow. I didn't even know the buttons were there.
It used to be at the top too. So this is recent. We updated our website more recently, so that's something I can bring up.
Yes, if the size just went down so the button showed when it comes up like on an iPad, it would be helpful, I think.
Thank you. That's it for the director's report.
So the answer is we don't need full-size drawings.
No.
Okay. And that's the director's report. Now, last minute commission communications. No?
I think we finally made some headway on roof decks. I really believe this might solve all the controversy.
Sure, we'll never have a problem with decks again.
We're good.
And with that, we'll adjourn.